Welcome. My name is Rick Naples, and I'm a realtor. On one of the previous real estate shows, we shared some stories with you about some of the experiences I've had as a realtor over the past few years. And I got such a great response from that show that we decided that we would do on this show a couple of more stories. You know, you run into all kinds of things as a realtor. You work with all kinds of people, and you look at all kinds of homes. So I have a couple of stories to share tonight. One is about a secret room. Some is about doing the real estate show. And I'm going to try to answer the question of what do naked people have to do with real estate? It's the real estate show. My first story involves showing a home. I call this story the secret room because that's basically what it's all about. Let me basically describe what happened here. I was working with a buyer and we were in one of our normal Connecticut towns and we were looking at a home that I'll call a bungalow style. This was an older home built in the early 1900s. It was pre-Cape Cod style homes, but it was a very nice home. It had a huge porch on the front of it, and it was set at the end of a long residential street. Now the house was a little bit up on a hill, so the view from the front porch was pretty cool. I mean, you would stand on the front porch and you were able to see all the way down the residential street to the far traffic light of the cross street. That was a good couple of blocks, it seemed, away. You could see everybody when they came out of their homes. You could see the activity of cars going up and down the street. You knew if somebody was coming. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because it all relates to this story and the secret room. You see, we went into the house and we're looking through it, and it was a beautiful home. It had wood floors. It had all nice natural wood carvings in the walls as far as the trim was concerned. That nice big archway between the formal dining room and the living room area with the pillars. It was really, really nice. Worn, because it was an older home and it needed obviously some refinishing work. But my buyer was very excited. Now, after we had gone through the whole house, the last thing for us to do was to go down in the basement. I usually, folks, do not go down into the basement with the buyer. I allow them to go downstairs and I stay upstairs. This just gives them the ability to go down on their own and explore and then come up with any questions that they have. But this particular buyer I had worked with on a number of different homes, so I was comfortable in going downstairs into the basement. And it was one of those basements where it had kind of a lower ceiling. It was a stone foundation that had been filled in with mortar and the walls cleaned and painted, and it had a poured concrete floor. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't a dark, dingy basement like you'd find on the older homes. We went to look at the furnace, and the furnace was one of those huge old style oil burner furnaces that looked like at one time you might be able to stoke or put coal into it for heat. It was pretty dated, and of course that was a concern in looking at this house because, you know, how many more years can that possibly have? And we noticed that behind the furnace area there was a wall that was modern wallboard, sheetrock, and it just seemed to be unusual that in a stone foundation basement, that age of a house, to see sheetrock down in the basement. We couldn't really figure out It wasn't a fireproof board, it was just sheetrock. So my buyer went over and looked at it a little closer, and he discovered that the sheetrock, or at least one panel, wasn't really attached to the framework on the wall. It was loose. So he was curious, and he tilted the sheetrock forward in order to see what was going on behind it. And lo and behold, behind this panel of sheetrock, there was a huge opening that had been cut through the cement, or cut through the foundation, the stone foundation. So he looked into it, we reached in, and it turned out that there was a light switch that was on the inside of the wall. We hit the light switch, and to our amazement, there was about an 8 by 8 or 8 by 10 room. It seemed behind the furnace and outside of the regular foundation of the home. What an owner had done, whether it was this owner or previous owners or whatever, it looked like they had cleaned out the soil underneath that front porch, poured in concrete walls, and made a kind of a secret room underneath the front porch that was hidden, and you couldn't really tell it was there. Now, of course, we were running all kinds of crazy ideas through our head, but there was in this particular room what looked like at one time several hanging lights and maybe some planting trays. I'll leave it up to you to decide what that room might have been used for and why it was hidden. But when you put all the pieces together, we kind of got a little silly because we thought the house is in a great position to be able to see if anybody's coming and going, and you have this secret room down in the basement. What could possibly have been going on? When I do the real estate show, there's a number of different challenges that I have. Now, at Nutmeg Television, where the show is shown and that you're viewing right now, there are two styles of television shows. There's what's called the studio show. This is where the participants in the show do it in a television studio. You have an off-site director, you have somebody that's in control of your lighting, someone that controls the volume or the sound that's going on, and you'll have one or two or three different camera people filming the show. And you've seen many of those shows on Nutmeg TV. The other show, or type of show that's done, is called a field production. And that's what the real estate show is. The real estate show is a field production. What that basically means is that I go to the television station and I sign out the television camera and supporting equipment, and I bring it with me into the field. A lot of times I'll film the real estate show from my desk, or I'll film it from a home that's up for sale, or if the weather's nice I might take it out in a field somewhere because I can operate on batteries and film from there. But a field production is basically a one-man or maybe a two-person production. I do everything myself here on the real estate show. So I need to set the camera, I need to frame the shot, I need to try and get my lighting correctly, get my sound correctly, and pretty much do everything myself, as well as host the show and write what I'm going to talk about. So having to do all those different functions, there's a lot of times where I get surprise interruptions when I'm doing the real estate show. And just to share with you some of the surprises, if you've ever been somewhere where somebody videotapes you, you know that you're being filmed, because if you look at the person that's using the camera, there's usually a red dot that's on the camera that tells you you're in recording mode. It's being recorded. Now, because I operate on batteries sometimes, and sometimes I'm a little lax and I don't check to see if the batteries are fully charged, I'll get into a role of talking about something on the show, and the battery will die. And that little light will go out, and I'll continue talking. I can't tell you how many times in a field production, because I don't have an off-site director, that I've been filming the show, talking on as I do, and didn't get it on film because the camera shut down. There's some other things that happen too. I remember one time setting the tripod that the camera's on, and for one reason or another, one of the legs wasn't actually tight. And I'm talking about a subject for the real estate show, and the camera starts to tilt. And of course, me being the trooper that I am, I continue filming while the camera is slowly starting to fall over. Of course, I had to stop and get up and stop it from falling over and maybe getting damaged. There's a few other things that happen during the real estate show. A lot of times when you're filming outside, you can't control the environment. So some of you have watched the real estate show and made comments to me about what was that background noise. And during the summertime, sometimes I have to deal with lawnmowers mowing the lawn, different animal sounds that happen in the background. I've had situations where I'm in the middle of filming something and a fire engine goes by or a police car goes by with its sirens blaring, and I have to stop. So the reason why I'm telling you this is it's very interesting in doing this show, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on besides just the subject that I'm talking about. And all I could say is I thank my lucky stars that Nutmeg TV has a wonderful editing system, and I'm able to kind of take some of that stuff out. I told a story on the real estate show about a stuffed bear, a life-sized stuffed bear, and how that surprised my buyer. And one of the things that I wanted to take a moment to talk to all the sellers out there is when you put your home on the market, try to look at it with new eyes. And what I mean by that is maybe have a friend come over or a relative come over and look at your house as a buyer might look at a house, and ask them to be very, very honest with you. You know, you live in your house for a number of years, you get used to the house environment, you have your stuff in the house that you're used to, the decor in the house that you're used to, and it might not be something that a buyer would find appealing. So you need to have somebody come in and give you that honest opinion. You know, when a realtor goes out on a listing presentation, one of the techniques that they do with the seller is they ask to walk through the house. This is to familiarize themselves with the features of the house, but to also get a feel and make constructive criticisms, you might say, or suggestions as to what the seller might be able to do to make the house more generally appealing, because it is going on the market and it is being shown. I have a practice that I've shared on the real estate show a number of different times where, if it's possible, I always like to have the seller come in the house through their front door and tell me what they see in the first 15 seconds that they've walked in the door. Where do their eyes land? What do they smell? And those kinds of things, because first impressions mean a lot when a buyer's coming to look at a home to buy it. You want to make sure all your lights are working, you want to make sure that there's no big furniture that's in the way, that there's clear pathways, you want to make sure the beds are made, please, the beds are made. You want to make sure the bathroom is clean and organized, toilet seat down, folks. You also want to make sure that the yard is well landscaped. And when we're in the fall season, you want to make sure that you clean up all of that fall debris that might fall in the yard from the trees. And in the winter time, please shovel your front walk, shovel your back walk, make sure that everything is safe to walk on so there's no slip and fall accidents, whether intended, unintended, or unexpected. Let's take a quick look at this, and I'll be back with my final story about what do naked people have to do with real estate. This story that I'm going to share with you, you can take whichever way you want to take. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's startling, but there's kind of an inside joke amongst many realtors that you know you've seen everything when you run into a situation where you're put into an awkward position of coming face to face with a naked person. Now, let me kind of explain how that happens. When a realtor is going to show homes to their buyer client, sometimes they schedule 4 or 5 or 6 houses to see on one particular Saturday or Sunday, or sometimes there's 2 or 3 if it's earlier in the year and stays light longer to see in the evening. Each one of those showings has to be confirmed unless it's a vacant home and the realtor has been given the instructions that it's what they call a log and go, which basically means they don't need to hear back from anyone. You just go and show the house. Now, the procedure in showing the home is the buyer selects a home they want to go see. The realtor, through either email, text, or a phone call, calls the listing agency or contacts the listing agent and requests the time that's convenient for their buyer to go look at the home. The listing agent, depending on what their instructions and setup is with the seller of the home, will then either make a call or a text or send an email to get the permission or the okay and notify the seller that the buyer is going to be coming to the home at such and such a time to see it. And then usually a confirmation email or text or phone call is given back with the instructions on where to go and how to show the home or what the code for the lockbox is or whatever. Now, a lot of times a seller will say to their listing agent, you have my permission to show the home during certain hours because I'm at work or I'm going to be away that day or whatever it might be. So the listing agent will put down in the notes that you can just go between such and such an hour. You don't need that email or that phone call or that text for that confirmation. I had a situation where I had a home to show and I was with my buyers and I did what I was supposed to do. I contacted the listing agency. It was what I mentioned earlier, a log and go, but it wasn't a vacant home. But basically it said if you're going to show the home between this hour and this time frame, go ahead and show it. You don't need a confirmation. Seller has already given their okay. So we went off to show the house. Now, unbeknownst to us, this particular seller had a college-age student that had come home on a break or for whatever reason, and it was unannounced or the listing agent wasn't notified. So needless to say, we went to the house, I knocked on the door. I always announce myself, which is something common a lot of realtors will do. I'll knock on the door and I'll say my name and who I'm with. And we'll enter the home and then we do our thing and look around. This particular student happened to be home that day. Communication had broke down where no one had told the individual that there was a realtor coming to show the house. Maybe the seller didn't know, maybe the listing agent didn't know. Anyways, bottom line is, we go into the kitchen and there is this person standing there. They had just gotten out of the shower and I guess they decided they were going to air dry. They didn't have a towel wrapped around them. They, of course, were shocked and startled. We were shocked and startled. It happens. So, long story short, everything was forgiven and there were no problems, but that happens. Another story that I want to tell concerning naked people is we had a situation where we went to do a home inspection. And I had sold a building that had a bunch of apartments in it. In order to do the home inspection, we had to notify each and every one of the tenants that at a specific time on a day an inspector was going to come in and needed to enter the apartment. The problem when you're selling multiple units is you have to be able to see everything. The buyer wants to see the whole building. They don't want to see 2 or 3 apartments and not be able to get into the 2 or 3 other apartments or whatever. They don't want any surprises. They want to see what they're buying. And it's their right to see what they're buying. So sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to coordinate a number of tenants with their schedules and you know, timing and the whole bit. So we did our best. We sent a email to the tenants because the landlord provided us with email addresses. We stopped by a few days before the inspection and posted a notice in the laundry room. We put an individual notice on each one of the tenants' doors so they would see it when they came in. We asked the landlord to call the tenants and remind them of the inspection. We did everything we possibly could in order to make sure that we had access to all of the units and that all of the tenants knew we were coming. Most of the inspection went fine, but we got to this one particular apartment and we knocked on the door and there was no answer. We didn't have keys because we were relying on the tenants to allow us in. We heard some rustling around behind the door. And finally, after what seemed to be like an eternity, the door opens up and there is a young lady standing there. And I guess she just woke up or whatever, and why she chose to answer the door without first fixing herself up, or I can't really explain what she was thinking. But anyways, she answered the door and she wasn't wearing any pajamas. Let's just put it that way. Obviously, we were a little shocked. She didn't seem to care. I introduced myself, as awkward as that situation was. She looks me straight in the eye and she says, "Okay, give me a moment." Closes the door, then comes back. She put on a robe, and we went in and we did our thing and we left. And needless to say, instead of talking about inspection items and concerns, the whole ride back to my office was a conversation on, did that really just happen? I'm sure a lot of the realtors out there can share a lot of stories. You just need to be prepared for just about anything, I guess it is, when you're in this building. This is the part of the show I call the Real Estate Mailbag, where I get to answer questions that are emailed to me at my email address or that are asked to me when I'm on the street, either by people or fellow realtors. I want to take a moment during this Real Estate Mailbag to say that I enjoy telling stories, and there's so much that goes on in the real estate business, and realtors have a ton of stories, that I've decided that I'm going to make it a segment of the show. So going forth, I'm going to have a segment that I call Rick's Realtor Stories, and it's going to be my opportunity to share with you some of the experiences that I've had or buyers or sellers have had during their real estate transactions as they pursue selling or buying their homes. And of course, I'll continue on answering emails that do come in here to the real estate show about questions that involve real estate. I want to thank you very much for watching the show. I enjoy doing this. I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.